Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's a beautiful Monday morning. Today is June 5th, 2023. We get together with our distribution partners most weekday mornings at this time to talk about strategies, tips, techniques, share success stories, and support each of you. We're going to talk about judgments today. You might say, well, why in the world are we talking about judgments? Well, certainly when clients or even referral partners begin a relationship with us, we always enter the relationship very optimistic and we want to do everything that we promise to do and hope the other party will as well. But invariably, for those of you that are small business consultants, on occasion, you'll have a client that enrolls but doesn't follow through. And so what we're going to talk about today is how we handle that and some of the behind the scenes actions that helps ensure that you get paid even if the client doesn't comply. So the screen's a bit busy. On the left-hand side, we have our agenda. On the right-hand side, we actually have a real default judgment that we recently received. So we'll go over and talk about this in a moment, but let's start with the agenda. So we want to understand judgment collections. As I mentioned a moment ago, as a small business consultant, what do? You don't have to sell anyone anything. As a small business consultant, you're taking one of two tracks. Either you're promoting the free funding proposal campaign, which we've talked a lot about. There's a 3-part training available on the career page of guaranteed funding if you need a refresher on that. Or alternatively, you're going in, you're doing the assessments, the 6-question assessment of small businesses to see if they're qualified for funding. What we're doing is helping small businesses become credible enough to get the funding that they need to start and grow. So with that, we always have written agreements with clients because that clarifies what everyone's expectations and roles are. The point here today is sometimes you'll refer in clients. You've done your part correctly. You've done your job, but sometimes clients will fail to comply. And that's always a shame. It's hurtful when a client commits to do something and they don't do it, or even small business consultants on occasion will have people that enroll as a small business consultant and then they don't do what they promised to do. So what happens is if there's a client, as we're talking about here specifically, and they fail to comply, then that means they've breached their contract. They've promised to work with us to raise, let's take access to capital, for example. They've enrolled, they promised to work with us to raise at least $100,000. We've committed, we promised to help them do that. We're on the hook to do that, but sometimes they'll stop participating. And so then that's a breach. And so then now the money is accelerated. Now they owe the money, even though they didn't receive the capital raise, and it's called an accounts receivable. So when we have an accounts receivable, in many cases, what we'll do is we'll litigate that contractual breach because we want to make sure as a small business consultant, you're getting paid. You've done what you promised to do. You've shared the message. And people have received the message, they've decided to enroll, they've enrolled, but then if they don't follow through, we don't want your money, your income to be lessened. So what we'll do is we'll ask you, what do you want us to do? So let's just take, we'll take Daphne's on the line here. So Daphne's one of our small business consultants. So let's say that Daphne either fed in someone through the free funding proposal or through the 6-question checklist, and let's just say it was Lon. So Daphne referred in Lon, and then let's say Lon quits. So Lon has committed a contractual breach. So we follow up with Daphne and say, well, Daphne, when you referred in Lon, we told you that you should make at least $3,000 from Lon, right? 3 points of Lon's capital raise. We know we promised Lon 100,000 capital raise. 3 points of that's 3,000. But Lon quit. Lon's not participating. What do you want us to do, Daphne? So we would ask Daphne, what do you want us to do? Daphne would probably say, well, we need to litigate. We need to hold Lon accountable for what he promised to do, right? Because we're doing what we promised to do. So then when we litigate, we almost always win because a breach of contract is kind of a slam dunk case, right? If the client signed up, or in the case of a small business consultant, but if someone signs up to an agreement and then they breach it, it's very easy to show the court that there was a contractual breach. So almost always we'll win. And so then we get a judgment. And that's what we have on the right-hand side is an example of a real judgment. We had 17 cases that we tried on May 10th. And I'll be back in court tomorrow for some other cases. But May 10th, we had 17 cases, and one of which was Kenneth Bell. Kenneth Bell, if I recall correctly, I don't think he was a client. I think he was a distribution partner. He signed up, and then he defaulted. And we offered to help him. We trained, we supported, but he defaulted. And so the end result is the judge, here's the verbs, the judge ordered, adjudged, never used that word in my life before, and decreed that Kenneth Bell owes us the $10,000 for his license fee. Same concept. If you, as a small business consultant, refer in someone as a client, they enroll in access to capital, for example, but then they breach it, then we'll litigate, almost always win, and then a judgment is issued. So once the judgment's issued, now we need to collect that money so you get paid. Because again, using that example, Daphne was expecting $3,000 at least for referring in Lon. And again, this is just a hypothetical example. I'm just picking two people that are on the training this morning. So Daphne didn't get her $3,000 because Lon quit. So then we would ask Daphne, what do you want us to do? If she tells us to litigate, then we'll litigate at no cost to Daphne, of course. We'll win almost every case, and then we'll get a judgment against Lon or whomever the person is. So let's dig into what this means, because getting the default judgment or getting a judgment in general is easy, relatively speaking, because it's a breach of contract. The question becomes, how do we turn that judgment into money? That's what our topic is today. So after we successfully litigate, we'll get a certified judgment from the court signed by the judge. And again, this is a real one. This is a real one signed by Honorable Jenkins Franklin, Judge Franklin. We do so many, unfortunately, we have so many clients that default. They've assigned a judge to our portfolio of receivables. And so Judge Franklin actually travels in to handle all of our cases. And so we'll be back in court together tomorrow for more cases. So in this case, this is what's called a certified judgment. So there's no question that in this case, Kenneth Bell owes the money. Going back to the example of Daphne and Lon, so we would get a default judgment or at least a judgment against Lon. And so now Daphne can feel a little better because she knows she's going to get paid even though Lon quit. So this shows the amount of money that must be paid. And in this case, it was $10,000 plus court cost. Now, in many cases, we'll add late fees if relevant. Okay, so now we know what a judgment is. We know why it's relevant to you, because if you're a small business consultant and you're referring clients in, you're expecting to be paid for what you've done. And I agree with that. If the client breaches, then we've got a problem. And so the way that we would resolve it is, of course, communication with the client. We can't resolve it amenably, then we would litigate. And from litigation, then we get the judgment. So we've discussed what a judgment is and why it's important to you, because if you're Daphne, you want to be paid. So how judgment collections are handled varies considerably. Some people, some entities are very passive, and we tend to be very aggressive. So we've built a team that has a knowledge of collections experience and familiarity with the process of judgment recovery. So we have a very, very high probability of collecting that judgment. And again, that matters to you, right? Because you want to be paid. The process that we use, again, it is legal, but it's faster and has a much higher successful collection rate. Because you'll have some people rather it be, Kenneth or in the example, Lon or whomever, say, "Ah, go ahead and sue me. I don't care. You're not going to get anything." That's rarely the case. Rarely the case if we're aggressive, because again, all of you that referred a client in, you expect to be paid, right? You did what you promised to do. We've promised what we promised to do. We've performed what we promised to do. But if the client breached, we need to make sure that we still get you paid. Our team is composed of aggressive and successful debt collection specialists. So you might say, "Oh, debt collectors, what are they going to do? They're going to report on my credit." Well, here we're talking about post-judgment collections. That's why I'm showing this to you. The court has said without question, the money is owed. There's no more debate. There's no more discussion. The money is owed, as determined with the seal of the judge. There's a wide range of creative and effective options that we can use to collect the judgment so you, as a small business consultant, are paid. One of the things that we can do is called post-judgment discovery. And this is not often done in the world of collections. It's legal, but it's very, very effective. And that's where we can demand detailed financial information from the debtor. So in this case, let's say Kenneth Bell, we litigated, we won, he owes us $10,000, so whomever referred him in can get paid. And let's say Kenneth Bell says, "Well, go stick it up your rear end. I don't care." Well, we'd say, "Well, Mr. Bell, we have the judgment, and so now we need to collect detailed information from you." And so we would make a motion through the court to request his bank statements, his credit reports, his tax statements, possibly his email history, a lot of information that he is required to provide so we can assess what assets that he has. And in this case, if Kenneth Bell doesn't respond, then we can file a different motion, and that would then make it a criminal activity because he's in contempt of court. And so in that case, he would actually go to jail, typically for 3 days, and then be required to provide the information. So the old school thought of, "Oh, go ahead and sue me, doesn't matter, you're not gonna get anything out of me, you'll never see a penny out of me." Well, maybe, but we're certainly going to get detailed financial information, legally and ethically, that's going to be uncomfortable. And we can also do in-person interrogatories, where that person has to fly in to Wood County, Texas, and spend anywhere from 1 to 3 days, where we're going through painstaking questions of, let's identify all the assets that you have, because once the default judgment is issued, we're going to be able to collect in almost all instances. There are 5 types of judgment enforcement, one of which is seizure of property. So we're literally taking property, in this example, from Mr. Bell to offset his debt. Again, using the example that we were having earlier. So we could literally find out what assets Lon has and start collecting his assets and selling those assets so we can make sure that Daphne gets paid. We can also do a wage garnishment, and that's where we actually pull from the individual's income, so it's garnished at the place of employment if they have W-2 employment. Bank levies. So you might say, "Well, how are we going to find out where Kenneth has bank accounts?" Well, remember, we're able to do post-judgment discovery. We can ask Kenneth, list every bank that you have a bank account with, or that you've had a bank account with in the past 24 months. We need the account number, the routing number, your statements. And so unless, in this case, this is hypothetical, I'm sure Mr. Bell will comply, but if he doesn't provide that, then he'll probably go to jail for 3 days. And if he does provide that, then we have the information we need for the bank levy. Then there's repossessions, automobiles and boats and so forth. And then also liens can be placed on homes and or businesses. So a lien doesn't generate immediate cash flow, but for them to ever sell the home or to be able to do much with their business. So What's the point today? Obviously, we want to do what we promise to do, and we want clients to do what they promise to do. But you, as a small business consultant, if you're referring in clients, you deserve to be paid. And I want you to have assurance that if you refer someone in and they don't participate, so you're not getting the 3 points that you're expecting, that we can litigate against the client for breach if necessary, not what we want. And then we can use post-judgment collection. And there's these 5 different ways to get money out of them. Statistically, once we have a judgment, about half the people will go ahead and pay or get on a payment plan. And so that makes the most sense. If not, then of course we need to go to post-judgment discovery and then proceed with post-judgment enforcement. So as stated on the summary, we're going to do what we promise to do. We'll obviously ask clients to do what they promise to do. If they don't, we still are going to work hard to make sure that you get paid for your referrals. We'll handle the litigation and post-judgment collections, so you don't have to worry about that, because it can be ugly, right? These people are not always nice when you're litigating against them, collecting them, going to their home or their business and taking property. It's not always a pleasant experience. But you, as a referral partner, you don't have to worry about that. You just go out, you create awareness, you refer folks in. Most clients will do what they promise to do. They'll get their 100,000. You'll get at least 3,000, 3 points. The point today isn't to make you think, oh, no one does it. Most people do comply, but for those people that don't comply, I just want you to understand the process. So let's get into questions, comments, concerns that any of you have. We've got a big group today. Who has any questions, comments, concerns on how we've got your back? You're a small business consultant, what we're doing to ensure that you get paid. That's the underlying message here today, is we want you to feel confident that we're going to work hard to make sure you get paid, even if the client breaches the agreement. Timothy asked, well, what's this deal with Bell and him being a referral partner? Well, that's a great point. So when we have small business consultants or white label partners, they come aboard, and Timothy, they don't pay anything up front. We give them a 30-day grace period. We provide the training and support, but the expectation, the contractual commitment is that we're going to work with our referral partners, and we should be helping at least 2 clients a week, 8 clients a month. The last thing that we want are a whole bunch of consultants who are not active, because that just consumes time and energy. So that's not the deal. So that's why I really enjoy working with each of you small business consultants, because you're committed, right? This isn't just something that's optional. You've committed, you've come aboard, and you said that you'll get plugged in, and that together after a 30-day grace period, we'll have at least 2 clients a week. That's why I really like working with you all, because you're committed, you're focused. But in the case of the Kenneth Bells of the world, some people will come in and then they won't engage. And so then they have a responsibility as outlined in their agreement. But I don't think that'll be an issue with any of you, because we're here to train and support. But most often the relevancy of today's discussion is not about small business consultants that go into default, but it's about small business consultants who have clients who enroll but fail to comply. And that keeps you from getting the 3 points that you expected. So what I wanted you to understand is that we're going to fight for you, go after the money that's owed to you to make sure that you're paid. All right. So we got a question from Mr. Smith. So the process is a bit different. So I'm not sure which process Mr. Smith's asking about, but let's just assume that Mr. Smith is a small business consultant and he's referring in individuals for the free funding proposal. So, well, not shown on the screen here, super simple. Everyone has a free website. There's a free funding proposal page. And so what you want to do is have your prospects either fill out the 4 pieces of information on your website on the free funding proposal page, which is first name, last name, phone number, email, or you could even put it on there for them. When that comes in, then our system is going to send them an Adobe application, a one-page application. There's some other informational material in it, but the application itself is one page. And without any hard inquiries, we're going to be able to get that individual some funding offers. Most people, I mean, we're seeing a lot of people get 10, 20, 30 different funding offers that they can choose from. Some get more. We've seen as high as 50 or 60 funding offers. And the worst they could get is one funding offer. Everyone will get at least one funding offer. So then the client will accept the funding offer, and then that will generate the flow of commissions. And so you'll be notified once you've referred someone in that has completed the funding proposal app and then has moved into funding, because the payout to each of you as a small business consultant is 3 points, 3% of their capital raise. Until their capital raise starts, there's no payout. Here, what we were talking about is what happens when you refer in clients that sign up, but then they fail to comply. Well, if they fail to comply, like the lawsuit I have tomorrow with a client, former client at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. She signed up. We did what we promised to do, and she quit. So then we litigated. Now, she's a bit more sophisticated, so she hired an attorney, which is fine, and the attorney will be here with her, I guess, tomorrow. But the bottom line is payment to you is based upon the 3% of the capital raise. And so that should work out just fine as long as the client complies. What we're trying to cover today, Mr. Smith, is what happens if the client fails to comply. Okay, Daphne's asking about state directors. So yes, we are looking to have a director, we call state director, of every state, 50 states, right? There's no cost to be signed up as a state director, and state directors receive overrides. Technically, they receive a 1-point override. So for instance, Daphne, if you were the state director, we would work together to build a team of small business consultants in your state. Ideally, you'd have one consultant in each zip code across your state. Doesn't have to be that way, but that's a perfect geographic model. And so let's say that that's 100 or a couple hundred small business consultants. Take a little time to ramp up. So then you as a state director, what you're doing is motivating and leading that team of small business consultants. So then they're out helping clients get free funding proposals. They're making their 3 points off each of those clients' capital raise, minimum of 3,000, right? Because 3% of 100,000 is 3,000. And then you're making a minimum of a 1,000 override for each. So Daphne's bringing up a good point. This process is not only very helpful to protect the financial interests of our small business consultants, it's extraordinarily important to our state directors, because let's just do simple numbers. Let's say you're a state director and we get 100 consultants underneath you spread out across the state, ideally one per zip code. So those 100 consultants should be active, right? Each consultant should be enrolled after a 30-day grace period, enrolling at least 2 clients a week, 8 a month. So 8 a month times 100 consultants, that's 800 deals that should be coming in a month. That's great. So if you're getting an override of 1 point off of each of those, that's 800 times 1,000. So I mean, potentially, and there's some ramp up time, you know, this is not instant money, but you're looking at around $750,000 a month in overrides if you have small business consultants doing what they promised to do. It's great. So if you're if you're a state director and you have small business consultants that have clients who fail to comply, then this process obviously ensures your money as well, those of you that are state directors. And anyone's interested in being a state director, just contact us and we can get you set up. No cost for that. Okay, so next question. Holly asked, when you pursue judgment from a client, does the small business consultant get paid before or after? Well, that's a good question, Holly. So as a small business consultant, you're getting paid 3 points of the client's capital raise. And so if the client quits, or here we say fails to comply, then especially if they quit initially, then there was no capital raise. So now we've got a problem. And that's why I described how we resolve that, because the client is responsible for complying. The client promised to work with us to raise at least 100,000 to make sure that the small business consultants are getting paid their $3,000, and to make sure the state directors like Daphne are getting paid their 1,000 override. So the comp model on the capital raise, of course, is off the capital raise. So we need to collect the money from the client based upon the results. Think about real estate, right? How much does a real estate agent gets paid for signing up a real estate client? Zero. They get paid at closing. Well, that's very similar. So small business consultants are paid over and over and over and over by all the clients they have each tranche of capital raise. State directors are paid over and over and over and over in overrides based upon each tranche, each round of funding. But funding has to occur. Now, we promise to deliver funding. That's not the issue. What we're talking about here is what happens if the client quits. So then the funding can't happen. And that's the issue that happened with the client that we're litigating against tomorrow. She quit. So she's complaining, hey, I didn't get my 100,000. Well, she quit. She stopped participating. She got some funding. I think she got 21,000 or so, but she quit. Well, of course you didn't get 100,000. You quit. And that's why we have participation requirements in the client agreements. And also, frankly, we have participation requirements in the small business consultant agreements, because if we're not active, then the results won't occur, of course. All right. And Daphne's talking about leveraging the nonprofit. So, it's up to you. I would recommend, I would encourage each of you to at least consider enrolling in our small business startup program. So we could, in fact, create a nonprofit entity that you would be the executive director of. Your money flow can go through your nonprofit entity. And with having a nonprofit entity offers not only access to grants, but also, I think, better community reception. So that is a best practice, is to, if you're a consultant or even a director, consider signing up for the startup package. Let us get you a nonprofit set up, and then all of a sudden grants become relevant and better community reception. Agreed, Daphne. All right, so let's wrap it up because we're about at the bottom of the hour. So what did we discuss today? We discussed the judgment collection process. Why is that relevant? Because if you're out doing your job as a small business consultant, we have the risk that some clients will fail to comply. We don't want that. We want them to comply. We want to do what we promise to do, and we ask them to do what they promise to do. But in some cases, clients don't. And frankly, in some cases, small business consultants don't, like Mr. Bell. So what happens if we can't get the client to comply? It's not ugly, it's not angry, it's not hateful. We just say, hey, you breached the contract. We litigate for the contractual breach. Win almost every case. Then we go to judgment collections. We get a judgment statement signed and certified by the court. And then we've described our approach of how we turn those judgments into money, and clarified that there's 5 ways that can happen. Seizure of property, taking their possessions, taking their wages, taking money out of their bank account, taking their automobiles or boats, putting liens on homes or businesses. Now, also, the group we're working with reports on credit, and that helps a lot because these post-judgment defaults go on the individual's personal and business credit reports. and those can't come off. They can go use whatever credit repair service they want. Those won't come off. They'll be re-reported. So again, if you need any individualized help, let us know. You can email us, you can call us, you can text us. Email is probably best. Any of you that are small business consultants or state directors, we ask you to please schedule weekly calls so we can train, support, accountability, review clients. So please have those weekly calls so we can make sure that we're on top of everything. And then, of course, consider joining us each day, 8 o'clock Central, just like today for the Zoom. Any other questions, comments, concerns on this topic matter that we covered today before we wrap it up? Understanding judgment collections. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We'll see you back tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Bye-bye.